So, Mark here with Green Leaves, and today I'm with Leslie Rowe, who's the coordinator for Green Leaves in the North East and North Yorkshire, and also serves as a local independent councillor.
Hello, Mark.
So, off we go today. So, we're going to go and leaflet the constituency, the marginal Labour constituencies of Stockton South and
Bishop Auckland.
Bishop Auckland.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about those two districts, Leslie.
Well, I mean, obviously they've been Labour for many years, up until recently in terms of Stockton South. But the extraordinary thing about Bishop Auckland is that it's obviously right in the heart of the Durham trade union belt, as it were, with the Bishop Auckland and Lee Shildon Railway Museum. Yeah. But it also extends right out into the Teesdale, right out to
Bardock Castle and then beyond.
Yeah, and a lot of them more. So it's an interesting place to walk. But the bits we're interested in are all near the Bishop's Palace and Bishop Auckland, which was.
And they're actually presumably very solid Labour, very perhaps like many of the marginals where we've been working. They're ex-industrial towns that essentially have not got a very straightforward purpose in our modern age.
Indeed, and a history of either voting Labour or just not voting at all, particularly since the pits all closed, which obviously was a lot of pits in that area.
Yeah.
There's been such a feeling of depression. You know, I mean, some of the places around there you can literally be given a house. They're giving them away. They are so cheap.
Depressed.
And it's so depressed. But I do feel Labour feel particularly let down after the referendum, because Bishop Auckland did vote solidly for leave.
Yes.
And ever since then, the Labour Party have been backtracking, and it's very noticeable if you go to that sort of area that the resentment that is felt by that.
So our campaign is focusing on the record of Labour MPs, and in particular the two Labour MPs that were that led the parliamentary manoeuvres to keep us in the European Union. So that's Yvette Cooper of Castleford, which is South, and Hilary Benn, son of the famous Tony Benn, who represents Leeds Central. And these two, between them, passed a couple of pieces of legislation that essentially prevented the government from taking us out of the European Union, essentially unless we had secured the consent of the EU, and because of deadlock over what that consent might be, essentially they tied us in. Yeah. And that, plus the record of many Labour MPs, I haven't yet analysed the voting records of the two MPs in question, but I suspect they're as bad as most Labour MPs in that they have probably supported both revoking Article 50 and votes for a second referendum. And now, whatever their voting record, if they're re-elected, they're going to be tied to the Labour manifesto commitment of a second referendum decision.
Yes, so extraordinary manoeuvres to pretend that they're actually negotiating, and then they're going to go off and campaign to remain anyway in this extraordinary referendum, which is going to be a choice between Remain and Remain.
From our point of view, it will be, won't it? I mean, we will not really have a realistic leave option that we could go out and campaign for if Labour end up negotiating.
Which shows, I mean, the pure duplicity of these MPs who initially supported the idea of a referendum, wanted a referendum to get the thing sorted, but when it went the wrong way from their point of view, they have spent the last 3 years effectively trying to make sure, as they did in so many other European countries, that the referendum decision is reversed, and that we're forced to remain within this club.
So effectively we're left with no other campaigning possibility except to campaign against them as MPs to seek that they don't get re-elected, because ultimately there are simply too many Remainers in the House of Commons for any sensible departure, be it leave with no deal or leave with a deal or any form of respect for the referendum to actually happen.
Well, the other thing is as well is that I think that Labour is standing up very much on a false promise, because I do believe that an awful lot of what they're suggesting they might do in terms of nationalising utilities, nationalising the water, bringing the railways completely back into public ownership will just not be possible within the EU, given the competition rules that are there. You know, I mean, okay, people say that other European countries get around it by allowing 20% or something to be allowed to be discussed, but
certainly in principle, it's going to be difficult to circumvent legislation like no state aid rules for companies, and presumably, if we remain part of the EEA, then we will be required to meet, at least in outline, no deficit funding. So we will be part of the economic controls on government, which is planning to spend many tens of billions extra a year on investment projects, which will breach those rules.
Exactly, and we would be subject to the same draconian measures that were imposed by the EU on countries like Greece, for instance, where they curtailed trade union rights, they privatised anything that wasn't bolted down, and they raided the pension funds, all to pay back French and German banks who overextended themselves in loans to Greece. And, you know, it's what I fail to understand about the Labour position. They can see what has happened in reality to other left-wing organisations throughout Europe. They've effectively been kneecapped, every single one of them, and forced to toe the line. And that would would happen to Labour if they tried to push through the policies that they're pretending to champion at this general election. So not only are they being, or were they disingenuous in the past by saying they supported a referendum and then turned against it, they're being disingenuous now when they're saying they can do things which clearly, under EU rules, they certainly can't.
Grand, right, well, we'll go out and say a little bit of this to the folk of Stockton and Bishop Auckland.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cheers.